Up next is Jon Wallace, who is Deputy Director for Fire and Aviation in the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for the Southeast region. Jon's presentation is applying next generation fire models and refining monitoring protocols to advance applications. You're on, Jon.
Thanks, Frank. Let me get all teed up here. Okay. So, applying next generation fire models and refining monitoring protocols. And so the Fish and Wildlife Service here in the Southeast is really moving forward with a project to incorporate LiDAR, light detection and ranging technology, into our fire monitoring. And also as we use new next generation fire models. And we're working pretty closely with the Los Alamos National Laboratory and Tall Timbers Research Station on this project. And so the three things that we're really looking at with our baseline LiDAR data, and I'll show you what that looks like here in a few minutes. We're looking at habitat, we're looking at fire behavior modeling using a program called QuickFire, and then we're looking at forestry metrics also. And so with habitat, you know, the first thing we need to know is, what does the ideal habitat look like? And I think everyone on the call would agree that we all know what it looks like, but it's hard to quantify that, to put it into numbers, to communicate it to other people. And so what LiDAR does is it gives us an opportunity to do that. It takes a snapshot of that ideal habitat out in the forest so that you can communicate it. And then you can also compare it to the conditions in other places to see how close you are to the ideal habitat. That helps you set priorities for burning or for future habitat management work. The second part, like I talked about, is QuickFire. It's a new fire behavior model that's still really in the developmental phase. We're working through some of the bugs on it, but I'm going to show you some of the outputs of it. And it's really specifically designed to help prescribed fire managers, to help us game out different scenarios in prescribed fire, distance between ignition lines, timing between ignition lines, things like that, so that we can best meet our objectives. It also has got a really nice smoke model in it. And then with forestry, as you walk through the woods gathering this LiDAR data, at the same time, you're also collecting basal areas and volume. Go out, touch a piece of vegetation, and then bounce back to the unit, and you get a picture much like you see here in the upper left-hand corner of the screen. And so from this, you can gather information like diameters of the trees, height of the trees, no more cladometers, no more DBH tapes, no more form tables. All that is gathered automatically. This is what a stand looks like from above. It gives you an idea of the crown spacing. And so again, instant overstory and midstory data. You can see the diameters, and this tool gathers these diameters and heights at every 3 centimeters, roughly every inch up the stem of a tree, or on the vegetation in the ground. So you're gathering a lot of data really quickly that can help you for a number of purposes. And of course, all that data has to be ground truth, right? We still don't want to rely just on technology to give us the answer. We still want to go out there and put boots on the ground, eyes on the ground, because one of the things that LiDAR won't do is it's not real good at capturing species diversity. And of course, for prescribed fire managers or for land managers, species diversity is one of the critical things we want to look at. And so for every 25th, 50th plot we put in with LiDAR, we're going out and collecting much more data that looks a lot like what our traditional forestry fire monitoring data looked like. Looking really at species diversity and then measuring things on the ground to make sure that all the stuff that's measured on the ground matches up with what we pull out of the LiDAR data. And so as fire managers, prescribed fire managers, this is really what we're looking at. We're really interested in the surface fuels. And so LiDAR does paint a really good snapshot of the surface fuels out on the landscape. And if you've used the old Behave program and the old fuel models, you know that that was a little clunky, wasn't it? You used one fuel model for a burn unit, maybe 2 or 3 fuel models for a burn unit, but it didn't give you a true picture of what the fuels actually looked like in the burn unit. With LiDAR, you can get a true picture of what things look like in the burn unit. You're always going to have shadows like you see under my cursor right now, where a big bush, tree, shrub blocked out some of the data behind it. And also right here. You're always going to have those, but the thing to realize is it's still head and shoulders above the traditional fuel models that we have used in the past. So it also picks up, you know, the shrubs, the bigger stuff. It doesn't just pick up the ground level stuff, vegetation. It also picks up the shrubs, things that are really going to increase fire behavior. And so, you know, at this point, I wanted to ask, you know, what is fuel? Fuel is just vegetation. We talk about fuel a lot, and I'm sure that all of you prescribed burners knew what I was talking about when I said fuel, but fuel is just vegetation. And vegetation in a world of LiDAR data and 3D data is a voxel. And so what is a voxel? And so if you look at the picture here, it's from a kid's game. It's from Minecraft. A lot of you have probably either seen this yourself, seen your kids or your grandkids playing with Minecraft. And what it does is it takes, you can see the blocky nature of it in this picture. And so what that blocky nature is simply a voxel, a 3D representation of what's out on the ground. But this looks really blocky, doesn't it? And so the resolution in Minecraft is not that fine of scale. It's very coarse. It allows the computer game to run quickly, easily. With our data, we can get as fine a resolution as 3 cubic centimeters. And so, you know, a cubic inch on the landscape. And so our voxels aren't nearly as big and clunky as what you see in the games. To help us run the quickfire model, especially quicker, we do upscale those voxels to 2 cubic meters in size. Again, a lot finer resolution than those old fuel models we're all used to using, but still not quite to the level of what you're seeing in Minecraft. And so we get this data in several different ways. We use terrestrial scans, which are scans done from the ground level, a lot like the unit you saw Amy sitting under earlier. And so the terrestrial scans really give us a partial view, kind of like here on the right-hand side of the screen. And so as you combine that with airborne LiDAR, or as you decrease the size of those voxels to get the really high resolution, you get a picture more like this. And so now you can see, you know, what is probably popping out is a nice longleaf pine out in a stand that you have picked out through LiDAR data. And so what does this look like on the ground? You know, what do we look at for fuel models? Well, we look at bulk density. We look at how densely the fuels are packed on the ground. We look at surface area to volume ratios. And, you know, the thing is, variation is a key attribute of fire prediction. And so now you can actually see how variation is taking place out in the woods, out in the forest. Before, you know, the old Rothermel spread model wanted to have one fuel model, no variation at all. And so you didn't get a super picture of what fire behavior you could expect when you struck that match or lit that drip torch and started walking through the woods. With LiDAR, trees and canopy fuels can be generated with the geometric representation like you just saw in the video clip. And you can also pick up the variation in surface fuels at really fine scales. Another thing is you can pick up topography. And again, a piece with that Rothermel spread equation in the old Behave program is it wanted to really have one topography out on the landscape. And we know that when you're burning in South Georgia, there is a tremendous amount of variation in fuels, or when you're burning anywhere in the South, really. There's a tremendous variation in fuels as you walk through the forest. And also, you know, the folks out west don't quite understand that a 2-inch change in topography down around the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge can have a big difference in fire behavior. And so now this LiDAR data captures those really fine, high resolution changes in topography and can add those in to this quick fire prediction model. And so really quickly, I am going to shift over to another program so that I can run this video in a way that you can actually see it. Oh. And we're going to let the folks at...
As wildfires ravage forests and communities with increasing frequency, land managers and firefighters are sharpening their focus on ways to minimize the destruction. They also want to return smaller, beneficial fires to the natural landscape. That's how nature kept ecosystems healthy and balanced, but human activity has interrupted that process. Prescribed fire is one of the most effective ways to safely bring back beneficial, low-intensity fires to clear out excessive fuels, such as trees and brush, leaving less to burn in a future wildfire. Variable winds, terrain, and vegetation play a critical role in deciding when and where to set a prescribed burn, but understanding the complex interactions among those factors is a huge challenge. To help land managers and firefighters manage the risks of prescribed fires and improve their effectiveness, Los Alamos National Laboratory researchers are developing software known as QuickFire. It's based on the physics of fire. Running on laptops and using information about weather, terrain, fuels, and other variables, QuickFire simulates a fire burning through the landscape. With that information, prescribed fire planners can engineer the safest, most effective prescribed fire. The result might be fewer wildfires that threaten forests, communities, homes, and people in the future. As wildfires ravage forests and communities with...
Okay, let me switch back over to my PowerPoint now. Wanted to give some credit there to the Los Alamos National Laboratory. Get the screen sharing going again. Okay. And so this is what quick fire looks like as it spreads across the landscape. This again is probably set from one prescribed fire ignition line, and they just let fire move up the slope. And so you can see as the fire moves across the landscape, it's burning through those three-dimensional fuel beds, those voxels on the landscape that have been created most likely by a LiDAR unit, much like I showed you earlier. And so you can see how they got scorched through the crowns, how they got more intense burning in different places, and where maybe they didn't get the desired effects that they wanted. And so that, as prescribed fire managers, is really one of our biggest challenges, right? Is meeting those objectives of making that landscape that we've just conducted a prescribed burn on look like the picture we had in our minds of what we wanted it to look like before we started burning. And so QuickFire can help us do that. It can also help us model smoke dispersion. And you know, the smoke dispersion models that we've used for years aren't incredibly sophisticated. And so now QuickFire takes into account the energy of the fire, the lift associated with that smoke column. And so now you can see out at 2,200 meters on this video, the smoke becomes really diffuse and scattered, not really an issue. At 1,320 meters from the ignition source, the smoke column is still very compact. It's still lifting. There's a lot of wind speed inside of that column that's generated from the fire itself. And so you can also see along the sides of the fire where there's a lot of winds that are generated by the fire itself. They're going to help move that fire into the center of that burn unit. So the smoke dispersion part of it, that research is still ongoing, but that is an incredible piece for a prescribed burn manager in the future. And so, you know, what we really want to be able to do though is game this thing out. As we prescribe burn, we want to have a better idea of what the effects are going to look like when we're done. And so here in QuickFire, you can see them putting in 5 ignition lines across the landscape. And so the model shows the interaction of the fire and burning those ignition lines together. And you can see on the right, the wind dynamics that happen inside of that stand as those lines burn together. And so, you know, from this, you saw those lines being put in pretty rapidly, right? Very close together, very rapidly. And so we as prescribed burn managers, you know, if our objective was to preserve the overstory, we would have probably moved a lot slower than this. And so you can game that out. You can look at how wide you should space your ignition lines, how quickly you should move through the forest to get the results that you want and are looking for. And so here you can see the effect of 5 ATVs moving across the landscape. On the left is the picture of the surface fuels burning. On the right is a picture of the canopy fuels. So this is surface fuels is up to 3 feet, and then the canopy fuels in this case are above 3 feet, 12 feet in height. This is a pine barren stand up in New Jersey. And so their objective for this burn was complete overstory replacement. They wanted to do a complete crown fire, a replacement of the stand. And so you can see that using these ignition patterns, 5 ATVs traveling at 6 miles per hour, 100 meters between lines, the delay between the lines is 9 seconds or 24 meters. Winds varying from 2 to 10 miles per hour. And then in this one, the second one, they delayed more. They put 27 seconds in between each person starting down the line. And so you can actually see the differences in the canopy fuels of how well they burned. So here's one with higher winds. Same thing, 5 ATVs, 6 miles per hour, 100 meters between lines, the same stagger, same delay time between igniting each line, but you see greater winds here. And so with this, you can see that less of this canopy is actually burning with the higher winds. It's really pushing through the surface, burning the surface really intensely, but it's not got the time to really preheat things and jump up into the canopies. Also in this, you can see that the model is predicting a spot fire across the line. And so those spot fire predictions inside of these models are becoming more and more reliable as time goes on. Just a few weeks ago, I was in California And we had a model that we were running that helped show where we could expect the fire moving out of our control lines. And so in those locations, we put more experienced resources. We put our better resources. And so maybe that's something you could consider with one of these prescribed fires. As you model things in quick fire, it gives you an indication of where your critical holding points are, where you might need to stage a few more resources, where you might need to stage some of your more experienced resources. And here's another one using ATV versus aerial ignition. And granted, they put in a lot of helicopter passes here really quickly, 12 passes moving at 50 knots. Space in between the line was just 25 meters, but you can still see the variability in how much was burned inside of these units, how well you're meeting your objectives. One of the big struggles that the Fish and Wildlife Service has, especially at a place like our Merritt Islands National Wildlife Refuge down in Florida, is the biology staff has one vision of what they want a compartment to look like after we do a prescribed burn. The fire staff has that same vision, but getting the results that make everyone happy is difficult. And so if we can actually plan out ahead of time where we want to put those aerial ignition spears from that helicopter, show the results, plan out things a lot more closely, a lot better, we'll stand a better chance of meeting the results that our biologists want to make the Florida scrub jays happy. So again, with this one, you see the model pushing a spot fire out to the north on this model run. And again, that may be a place where you'd want to stage more resources, more experienced folks. So with that, I'm going to say end of show and open it up for questions.
Thanks, John. Some interesting and cool toys that I think I need to get my hands on. So you guys out in the audience, you see a little Q&A at the bottom of your screen. Click on that. A couple things there. There's been some people asking about CFE credits. You'll see my answer to that. But also, if you have a question for John or any of the speakers, go ahead and type it into that box there, and I'll try to get them to the speakers. So, John, couple questions. Is Quickfire available to check out?
No, it is still not available to check out. I suspect within the next year, you're going to start be seeing this more and more. We're still trying to work some of the bugs out of it. I'm working very closely with the folks at Tall Timbers, Kevin Hires especially, and he's one of the ones that's going to be deciding when this becomes ready for normal applications. The interface is still a little sketchy. It's right now it makes you want to be a computer programmer to run it. And one of the things Kevin is working hard to do is making it more user-friendly. And once they do that, I think you'll start seeing it more.
It's really cool to see that graphic. I know, you know, we play around with interior ignition and number of people that are walking through the unit, and it really changes the fire behavior when you just pause. Like, you're going to wait 5 minutes before you send that next igniter in. And that was a really great graphic of exactly what that fire is doing. So that's cool.
Yeah.
Someone has asked if, how does the fuel moisture get input into those?
So the weather stream actually comes in, it can pull directly from the national forecast grid. And so it's pulling down temperatures, humidities, wind speeds on an hour by hour basis. You can also pull the averages. If you're planning, use those from that national forecast grid, and that's what feeds the fuel moistures.
Gotcha. And someone would like to know if these models have been ground truthed?
They are in the process of being ground truth. That's you know, that's part of the work we're doing right now, is a lot of ground truthing going on. You know, we're still in the process of trying to collect a lot of the base data to actually make these models run. But we're gaining some traction on that too. You know, once we get more places where we have the base data, where we're able to ground truth more and more, that's, again, one of the next steps that we're going to have to take before we make these available widely.
Cool, cool. Someone really liked that intro video. I was wondering if you could maybe shoot me an email with a link to that, and I can post it in the Q&A so people can get a hold of that video. Others have asked if these presentations are going to be available later on. And if you did click on the Q&A, you saw that I did answer yes, we are recording today. And if you have a registration and you're in here, you will get an email with the link. So later you can come back and watch these things at your leisure. Okay, let's see. Oh yeah, someone else, oh, this is a canned question, watch out. Do you think Quickfire would be able to help teach smoke management techniques to understand how the burn shape and ignition are going to determine how that smoke disperses?
So yeah, I think Quickfire is going to be great for that kind of question. You know, the smoke model, like I said, is still one that's being worked out some. But being able to alter those lines of ignition, being able to slow things down or speed things up, all that's going to be captured inside of that smoke model, and show how smoke is going to disperse. I think, you know, me personally, one of the biggest things that I see coming from this is being able to better quantify where my smoke is going and how quickly it disperses.
Very cool. Smoke is a really, really important thing that we all need to be thinking about, especially with the pandemic going on. You know, whatever tools that are available out there to make sure we're doing good smoke management screening is awesome. We had a question about your LiDAR. What is the range of the portable LiDAR unit that was shown on the tripod?
So we limit ours to a 50-foot radius. So about a 5th acre forestry plot. In some places, it'll go out wider than that. We did our preliminary work up at the Carolina Sandhills National Wildlife Refuge, and the forests are so open there that we were actually getting data returns out to about 100 foot from the unit itself. So, but we really try to limit things down to about a 50-foot radius. It makes it cleaner when you're doing the forestry calculations.
Okay. Cool. And then back to Quickfire. Is there a limit to the size of unit for which Quickfire would be a useful tool?
No, I don't think there is a limit to the size of the unit. You've got to understand, though, that it's going to take longer to run a bigger unit than a smaller unit. But no, I actually think some of the bigger units, it could be really incredibly useful for helping you lay out really complex ignition patterns.
Excellent, excellent. Well, if you guys think of any other questions throughout the day, you can go ahead and send them to me, and I'll get those over to John. And in between his wildfires, he can maybe get back to you with an email. But keep checking on that Q&A today. I've got some really good information from Southern Fire Exchange about some more information about Quickfire. So I'll be posting that into that Q&A chat, into the answers, so you'll be able to see it. But now it's time for our second polling question. And as we mentioned earlier, it was a really weird year for fire. You know, we started out with a super wet winter. A lot of places, North Georgia, Western Georgia, just didn't get to burn very much early in the winter. Our Southeast Georgia guys, our crew did really, really well. But overall, DNR's numbers were down by about 27% from our average years. Some of our IBT partners, oh, that's another hat that I wear. The IBT, that is the Interagency Burn Team. Some of our partners, like Georgia Forestry Commission and U.S. Forest Service, had to suspend all burning operations because of COVID. So overall, numbers are generally down for the year. A lot of us kept burning, and we were super careful, and I appreciate that. But let's go ahead and deploy our second polling question, Lisa. And that is, in a typical year, how many acres do you burn? Of course, that varies year to year, according to weather. You can see this, I don't know if this is going to show up, IBT map. No, you can't see it, the polls anyway. It was a low year this year. 2 years ago it was low because of the wildfires in the fall of 2016, and then the really dry year, the spring of the Okefenokee. So numbers are going to go up and down. This year, in general, we have about a third of our audience, and that's 400. We just hit 400 people. Sweet. About a third of us are burning between 100 and 1,000 acres a year. Right at a quarter of us are burning over 1,000 acres a year. And a quarter of us are burning under 100 a year. And I also see about 20% of us have not burned at all. So I'm hoping that today is good for everybody. Good for the new people, good for the experienced people, and we're all learning this stuff together. So thanks again, Jon, and back to you, Frank.